inside the schools. I think people are rightly saying you have to cut the police budget and change what we mean by policing, what its focus is, how it works, and we must use that funding to take roles away from policing that shouldn't be policing, like people in our schools, and make it the people we need in our schools in order to keep them safe, which means dealing with the mental health issues students have, dealing with the problems that arise and the safety net supports they need when they're in trouble. And we will have something different. So that call is not, I agree that the word defund does not capture that, but I think what we're hearing about what the demand is exactly right, and we shouldn't get caught up in the words. We should get caught up in the clarity of the demand, and the demand is policing should not be what it is today, and we should have a radically different vision, and in my view, a vision of policing that is what we call problem-oriented policing, meaning focus, strategic, and partnering, not just with communities, but with other agencies, because they're often the best on the front line to say, here are problems that other agencies should be helping to fix. It shouldn't be a police problem, like selling you cigarettes on a street corner because you don't have a job, which is Eric Garner.
Well, Maya Wiley, you just in 2 minutes brought more clarity to this issue than anyone I've seen talk about it in 10 days. Let me just follow up with one question. I mean, it sounds, and I'll leave the semantic debate to others, but it sounds like what it is in sort of early childhood psychology is early intervention. And it's that sort of the concept. You're getting to these kids before they're in trouble and having their first interaction with law enforcement. You're helping them. You're plussing up things that will keep them from heading down that path in the first place.
That's part of it, Nicole. But the other part of it, and part of the reason that the protests are passionate, is that the reason that kids are being pulled into the criminal justice system in the first place are their assumptions about their behavior, not what their behavior actually is. Let me give you just a very clear example. This was in the New York Times just back in December. We have Black and Latino police officers who have filed a discrimination complaint against the department because they were instructed, according to them, to leave white people and Asians alone. Go after Black and Latinos if you see them jumping the turnstile. In other words, not paying the subway fare. Focus on them. Get them into the criminal justice system. By the way, so many New Yorkers cannot afford the fares, but we could criminalize that by taking them to jail, or we could recognize what is it about the lack of affordability, the fact that people can't pay, as the first instance, not to see them as criminal. And what Blacks and Latinos all around the country are saying, what I feel passionately about is, part of the call here is start seeing us as people, stop seeing us as a problem.
All right, so that was from June 8th, Deadline White House on MSNBC. That was attorney Maya Wiley giving more clarity to this whole concept of defunding police. And if you've been watching my show, I said messaging is everything, and we need to change that phrase and talk about reducing responsibilities and reallocating resources. The 4 R's: reducing responsibilities, reallocating resources, because defunding the police is nebulous. And this past week, Trump and his supporters have flipped it, and they're talking about defend the police, defend the police. Okay, we got a few minutes left here on 910 a.m. the Superstation. We're going to continue at the top of the hour on my social media platforms, the African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP. I want to go to some more of these updates here. So, because there's so much that took place this past week, and I do so much reading on a daily basis, I want to just try to give you some of this. Read the updates from the Washington Post dealing with George Floyd and what's coming up, the live updates. It was last updated June 10th, 2020, 10:35 p.m. But Minneapolis Police Chief Madaria Arradondo said he was withdrawing from contract negotiations with the local police union as he pursues reforms that would make it easier to terminate police officers who act inappropriately. I saw his press conference earlier in the week. You're going to hear a lot more about that. We also know that on Tuesday, the funeral for George Floyd took place. And it was eulogized by Reverend Al Sharpton. Millions of people, at least around the country, saw that. I'm not sure how many people around the world saw that, but I know many millions of people around the country, because it was shown on MSNBC, CNN. It was shown on local affiliates, NBC, ABC, CBS, all around the country. And it was streaming on various media platforms on Facebook, YouTube, etc. So it was something phenomenal. Reverend Al Sharpton announced a march on Washington, August 28th, 1963. August 28th, 2020, to commemorate and revitalize the spirit from 1963 and move forward. You'll hear more about that. Forbes.com had a really good article, and I'm switching around to some of these different topics here. British protesters throw slave trader statue into river, and other stunning global protests. Forbes had a really good article dealing with this. We posted this on our Facebook fan page, got over 1,000 likes. British protesters throw slave trader statue into river, and other stunning global protest moments. As protests in the wake of George Floyd's killing enter their 12th day. This is from June, what day was it? June 7th, 2020. Okay. Stunning images and video have emerged over the past 24 hours from around the world, including a group of UK protesters throwing the statue of a slave trader into a river. Let me know how much time we have left, JT. Protesters in Bristol. Say that again. 3 minutes. Okay, thanks. Protesters in Bristol, England, toppled a statue of a 17th century slave trader named Edward Colston, Colston, and tossed it into the local river. Police say they have launched an investigation to try and track down the people responsible. Now, I read an update. They were able to retrieve the statue out of the river. Okay. Massive crowds assembled in cities throughout the world to march against racism and police brutality, including London, England, Brisbane, Australia, Rome, Italy, Berlin, Germany, Tokyo, Japan, Palestinian territories, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, San Francisco, California, New York City, and Washington, D.C., Detroit, Michigan, Chicago, all around the world. Protests are taking place. Protesters in Brussels, Belgium, ascended a statue of King Leopold II, who was responsible for the killing of really tens of, some sources say 10 million, other sources say upwards of 10 million in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the Congo, they ascended a statue of King Leopold II while waving the flag of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which Leopold ruled over as a colony in the late 1800s, and which saw countless atrocities as his people and land were brutalized for the rubber trade. Okay. So read this article here from Forbes.com. British protesters throw slave trader statue into river, and other stunning global protest movements. Also, we see here in the US, we see statues of Confederate quote unquote heroes. They were really traitors to the Union who killed soldiers in the Union. We see some of those statues coming down. Protesters in Portsmouth, Virginia, defaced a Confederate monument at the center of town this past Wednesday, setting upon it with spray paint, ropes, and bolt cutters, B-O-L-T, as police officers and local officials watched from the sidelines. Toward the end of the night, someone was injured when part of the structure came tumbling down. Now, I've said before numerous times, and I will maintain this, every single Confederate statue and monument should be taken down in the U.S., but they should be put in museums. I'm against people just taking upon themselves to tear them down, things like this, because I don't want people to do that to our statues, like of Octavius Cato in Philadelphia, or the statue of Rosa Parks that was just put up a few months ago in Montgomery, Alabama. The Confederate statues Those are honoring traitors to the Union who committed treason based upon Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Every one of those statues should be taken down. A historical marker should be put in their place to talk about what was up and what was and why it was taken down. But they should all be put into museums. And this history has to be taught in schools. Okay, this goes back to this document here. This study here, Teaching Hard History American Slavery from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Go to splcenter.org and download this study, Teaching Hard History American Slavery, which documents how the history of slavery is incorrectly taught in schools across the country and gives numerous reasonable steps on how to more correctly teach that history. Okay, so we got to wrap it up here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation and Future Radio. We'll continue on my social media platforms. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. Right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo. We'll talk to you next week. Peace. All right. So we're done on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, Future Radio. I do 2 hours on 9:10 radio here in Detroit. 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF in Detroit. And we're here on my social media platforms. My Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Also my YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP. IMHOTEP. Okay, so let's continue here. Also, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Then also through PayPal, paypal.me/ the AHN Show, paypal.me/ the AHN Show, and on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. How's everybody doing? And follow me on my social media platforms also. So let's see here. Let's go to little Dave Chappelle. Did you see Dave Chappelle 846? Okay, let's I don't know where we are in this. I was watching some of it. He tripped me out when he talked about Candace Owens also. Let's see. Let's go to little Dave Chappelle. Here we go.
I don't know what she did. She kicked the motherfucker that was handcuffed or hit a guy that was handcuffed or something. But Chris Dorner, the black police officer who watched this white woman do this, reported this to his superior, made a formal complaint.
Oh, he's talking about Chris Donner.
Fired.
Let me back this up a little bit.
Don't lie to you. And every institution that we trust lies to us. How come they never talk about Chris Dorner? That's a story about a man who believed he did everything right. Do you know who Chris Dorner is? Chris Dorner, if you remember, was an African-American police officer in the LAPD. He was executing a warrant with his partner, who was a white woman. And white women, I support you, but boy, if y'all don't shut the fuck up. During the process of executing this warrant, this white woman did what Chris Dorner thought was excessive force. I don't know what she did. She kicked the motherfucker that was handcuffed or hit a guy that was handcuffed or something. But Chris Dorner, the black police officer who watched this white woman do this, reported this to his superior, made a formal complaint, and was subsequently fired from the LAPD. He went through the system. He took every legal avenue that he believed he had to get reinstated, and he was not reinstated. And when his last appeal was finished, this motherfucker, some wild shit, wrote a manifesto. You know where this is going. And in that manifesto, he called me a genius. Me, Dave Chappelle. Not just me, but me. He said, Kevin Hart fan too. But he called me a genius, and he told Bradley Cooper, who's a friend of mine, don't do any more hangovers, nigga, that's enough. That's what he said. And he told his story. Chris Dorner told his story, how he did everything right when he was in the military and subsequently everything else. This is before any of this shit happened. And then he said, which was the wildest thing, he said, I'm going to wage asymmetrical war on the LA Police Department and their families. That's an ominous thing to say. And he did it. This motherfucker ambushed 2 police officers who were just sitting in their squad car, murdered them. He went to another police officer's house and killed his daughter. Boy, it was terrifying. And this motherfucker was on the run. He was doing it. I was supposed to do the Grammys. I was supposed to present at the Grammys that week. And a guy from the LAPD called me and said, Mr. Chappelle, we understand you're coming to Los Angeles. And I don't know if you know, but there was a lunatic on the streets who was killing police officers. And we would like to know if we can pick you up at the airport. We're extending this courtesy to everyone he mentioned in his manifesto. And I told the police, I'm fine. I read the manifesto. He likes me. Is there anything I can do for you, nigga? Because I'd be very worried. They found him. Big Bear. He was hiding in a cabin. When they figured out what this nigga was, no less than 400 police officers showed up and answered the call. And boy, let me tell you something. They Swiss cheese this nigga. He is as dead could be. He is done. And you know why 400 cops showed up? Because one of their own was murdered. So how the fuck can't they understand what's going on in these streets? We saw ourselves like you see yourself. They wasn't the only one. LeBron James once said something about racism, and Laura Ingraham, which I will say publicly anywhere, anytime, is a cunt. Tell him I said it. Told one of Ohio's greatest residents ever, shut up and dribble. Tell you something about LeBron. This nigga was on the cover of Sports Illustrated when he was 17 years old and exceeded every expectation that they had for him. This business is treacherous. This is a good guy, LeBron. He's a family man and this, that, and the other. He didn't let anyone down. He didn't let anyone down. Came back to Ohio, won us a championship, and it was like, I'm gonna move to LA. And everyone in Ohio was like, nigga, we understand. It's a good man, LeBron James. This bitch told my friend to shut up and dribble. My friend is the best at something, and this bitch is not the best at anything. She's a regular ass white bitch with a platform. And I use the word bitch all the time because this is black. You watch one shooting after another. Eric Garner in New York, the first guy that told the police, I can't breathe. Eric Garner was selling loose cigarettes in Staten Island. When my kid was born, my first son, my wife lived in Staten Island. It's an awful place. She knows it. Everyone who's ever been there knows it. Yuck to Staten Island. And my black ass would go there, and I got a lot of fans there and friends there, but it's a very terrible place. Fuck everybody in Staten Island except the Wu-Tang Clan. Got murdered by one police officer while 5 of his fellow officers watched him do it. Not one of them said, Frank, take it easy, none of that shit, because they were being recorded. Because they were afraid if I correct my fellow officer on this camera, it's gonna open us up for some kind of liability. And the guy killed the person that they were what do you call it? Apprehending? The guy was selling loose cigarettes. There goes Eric Garner. And then we have one after the other. Trayvon Martin gets murdered by just a regular nigga that George Zimmerman is nobody. George Zimmerman is an awful human being. Threatened Beyonce's life. He threatened Jay-Z's life. He signed Skittle bags because Trayvon Martin had Skittles on him when he was.
All right, so that's an excerpt from Dave Chappelle. Okay, his latest stand-up special. It's on YouTube, so you can watch it in its entirety. 846 Dave Chappelle. So check that out. Rollingout.com has an article about it. We'll post the link here to the article from Rolling Out. And he talks about, he rips Candace Owens in it also. And he said something to the effect that I'm going to clean up. Here's a little raw language from Dave Chappelle, right? Usually, I don't use language like that on the African History Network show usually, unless maybe I'm talking about Trump because I'm pissed off. But he said that something to the effect of Candace Owens looks like her vagina doesn't smell too fresh. Okay. Now, I said we should take up a GoFundMe for Candace Owens so she can buy some black hair care products, because her hair always looks like is messed up. She always looks like she's having a bad hair day. You know, maybe that's why she's married to a white man. I don't know, because no brother would tolerate something like that. I don't know, but that's something else. Okay, how's everybody doing? Okay, welcome to the African History Network show in overtime. Okay. This is where you really find out what I think, because we do 2 hours on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. That's FCC regulated radio. Here this is Michael M. Hotep Unfiltered. All right. Okay, so how's everybody doing? We have Eric, we have Linda. Oklahoma OKC is viewing, Linda said. Okay, good. And we're also on my YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP, on YouTube as well. So you can watch us on YouTube also. All right, we're going to get into some more of these other topics. Also, who we have on YouTube, W. Canty and Christine and Fly Girl. Just a few of the people watching on YouTube. Okay, so we have Confederate monuments coming down one way or another. Protesters of Virginia deface and dismember Confederate monument. So we have that taking place. Outrage over the monument boiled over after city councilors earlier in the day postponed a decision over whether to remove it, and 2 local NAACP leaders were arrested during an afternoon demonstration at the site. The Virginian Pilot reported, there's a local newspaper there. The monument, which was finished in 1881, is a 35-foot granite obelisk. Now, an obelisk is a tekken. That's an ancient African symbol. The Greek term is an obelisk. Is a 35-foot granite obelisk that features 4 white bronze Confederate soldiers and several Confederate artifacts inside. It is in the town square of Portsmouth, a majority black city of 96,000. Okay, so you got this Confederate monument in a majority African-American city. It was erected near a site where slaves used to be punished. Okay, now these Confederate monuments, when you study their history, as I said in our first hour, the Confederate monuments were largely erected to terrorize African-Americans and to remind us of our low position in society, the low position that white people want us to have in society. The 2 periods of time when you have the most number of Confederate monuments being built, okay, is not right after the Confederacy. Not right after the Confederacy ended in 1865, not right after the Civil War ended in 1865. 1895 to 1915. 1895 is the year before Plessy versus Ferguson, U.S. Supreme Court case, which legalized separate but equal, okay, and legalizes segregation. And we know 1915 is the second year of World War I, and in 1915 is also the year the movie The Birth of a Nation comes out as well, which rejuvenated the Ku Klux Klan. And 1915 is also the 50th anniversary of the end of the Civil War and the 13th Amendment. Then you have 1955 to 1970. 1955 is the year after the U.S. Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Board of Education, which was made 1954. And right after Brown versus Board of Education, you have efforts to solidify segregation in this country. The governor of Virginia suspended school for the rest of the year because they didn't want to desegregate. You have an increase in the use of school vouchers. So school vouchers are being given to lower income white families so their children can go to schools and lock out African-American children from these schools. And also you have a lot of schools being renamed after Confederate generals and Confederate heroes and things like this, okay, in defiance of Brown versus Board of Education. This is going to take place right after Brown, and we're going into 1955, things like this. And we go into the civil rights movement. We see more of these Confederate monuments being erected. Okay. So we really have to understand this history. And unfortunately, most Americans don't understand this history. History is incorrectly taught in schools across the country. So as this whole Reformation takes place, and some people like Reverend William Barber III calls it a third Reconstruction, we also have to deal with the education system and reimagine and reconstruct the education system. Okay, because what happens in the criminal justice system and what happens with policing is a reflection of the miseducation that's given to school children all across the country. Okay, when they don't understand the history of slavery, they don't understand the history of the Civil War, etc. And then they're being fed stereotypes through the television. All right, all this comes together. Okay, so it's not just one piece. We have to understand. Dr. Francis Cress Wilson and Nellie Fuller were correct when they talked about how if you do not understand European white supremacy and racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you think that you understand will totally confuse you. Everything else that you think that you understand will totally confuse you. Okay. Now I'm going to zip through some of these topics here because I have a ton of stuff here. Okay. And I've been reading these updates from the Washington Post, New York Times. So I have probably about 50 different articles to try to cover. But LeBron James, Dave Chappelle mentioned LeBron James. LeBron James and other stars form a voting rights group. LeBron James and other stars form a voting rights group. This is the time for us to finally make a difference, the NBA superstar said of the new group, which will aim to protect African Americans' voting rights. New York Times had a big article dealing with this from June 10th, 2020. Thegrio.com picked up this article from the New York Times, June 11th, 2020. So LeBron James said, because of everything that's going on, people are finally starting to listen to us. We feel like we're finally getting a foot in the door. He said in a telephone interview on Wednesday, quote, how long is up to us? We don't know, but we feel like we're getting some ears and some attention. And this is the time for us to finally make a difference. So LeBron James and a group of other prominent African-American athletes and entertainers are starting a new group aimed at protecting African-American voting rights, seizing on the widespread fury against racial injustice that has fueled worldwide protests to amplify their voices in this fall's presidential election. The organization is called More Than a Vote, More Than a Vote. It will partly be aimed at inspiring African Americans to register and cast a ballot in November 3rd, 2020. But as the name of the group suggests, LeBron James and other current and former basketball stars, including Trae Young, Skylar Diggins-Smith, and Jalen Rose, will go well beyond traditional celebrity get out the vote efforts, which is good. Now, LeBron James, who's 35 years old, said he would use his high-profile platform on social media to combat voter suppression and would be vocal about drawing attention to any attempts to restrict the franchise or the franchise of racial minorities. Okay, we got to stop using that term, minorities. If you're talking about beyond African Americans, people of color is better than racial minorities. Minor means lesser than. Okay. If you're talking about African Americans specifically, don't say people of color. If you're talking about African Americans, Hispanics, things like that, is This makes more sense to say people of color than racial minorities. LeBron James goes on to say, quote, yes, we want to go out and vote, but we're also going to give you the tutorial. We're going to give you the background on how to vote and what they're trying to do, the other side, to stop you from voting. Okay. So it's nonpartisan. So when they have, this is a nonprofit, most likely a nonprofit organization. When they have nonprofit organizations like this, it's nonpartisan. They don't tell you who to vote for. They teach you about the different policies. They teach you about the issues, things like this. And they're also going to talk about voter suppression and voter suppression tactics and who's targeted through voter suppression. African Americans are targeted. Hispanics are targeted. College students are targeted. Okay, not just African American college students, white college students are targeted for voter suppression as well, because college students are more likely to vote for Democrats than Republicans in general. LeBron James made no mention of Donald Trump, who he has sharply criticized in the past, but he repurposed Donald Trump's slogan to hail, H-A-I-L, hail America's beauty, explaining, quote, we want to be beautiful once again, end quote. Now, the new organization represents LeBron James' most significant foray yet into electoral politics. He has long said that he believes his greatest legacy will come from his off-the-court achievements. He has poured millions of dollars into his native Ohio, helping to underwrite college tuition for low-income students to attend the University of Akron, and Akron, and even opening his own school in the city for children in 3rd through 8th grade. Okay, so check out the rest of this article here from the New York Times. Now he goes on to say, invoking the names of an earlier generation of athletes who called for social justice. LeBron James, a forward for the Los Angeles Lakers, said he wanted to be a model for future generations. He said, quote, I'm inspired by the likes of Muhammad Ali. I'm inspired by the Bill Russells and the Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, the Oscar Robertsons, those guys who stood when the times were even way worse than they are today, end quote. Quote, hopefully someday down the line, people will recognize me not only for the way I approached the game of basketball, but the way I approached life as an African-American man, end quote. So this is something really good that LeBron James and others are doing, but LeBron James is spearheading this. So read this full article from the New York Times. LeBron James and other stars form a voting rights group. LeBron James and other stars form a voting rights group. Now, this is the same LeBron James that Laura Ingraham on Fox News told to shut up and dribble. Okay. And then thegrill.com has the article, LeBron James forms voting rights group to protect the black vote. All right. Let me try to pull up this clip here. We're going to talk about the police reform bill the Democrats unveiled this past week. I think that was it Tuesday, either Monday or Tuesday. We'll talk about that. NBCnews.com has an article I posted about that. Now, some people majoring in the minors, some people were more distracted, more concerned about them taking a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds or wearing kente cloth, and just superfluous majoring in the minor, Simple Simon ass nonsense like that, as opposed to focusing on the substance of the bill. Okay. Being that Muhammad Ali was talked about, we know April 30th, I think it was April 30th, was the anniversary of Muhammad Ali refusing to be inducted into the army to go fight in Vietnam, refusing to be drafted. And I wanted to talk about that the past couple of weeks, but we ran out of time, didn't have a chance to deal with that. History.com has an article dealing with that. But that was 1967. Okay. And let me see here. Do we have this clip here? So we know he's stripped of his title. He's out of the ring for 3.5 years. He comes back and fights. 1971 fights Joe Frazier, loses to Joe Frazier. He's going to end up winning his title back October 30th, 1974. He defeats George Foreman, the Rumble in the Jungle, which he renamed the Rope-a-Dope, in Zaire in Africa. And he goes on to fight Joe Frazier again, beats Joe Frazier. Okay. 1971, after he wins his fight with the U.S. Army and Supreme Court rules in his favor, he did an interview. He was interviewed by a man named Parkinson on for the BBC. Okay, Parkinson ended up doing 4 interviews over the number of years. Okay,
things are getting much better, but I always wonder when I went to church on Sundays. I've always been one to, I'm not just a boxer. I do a lot of reading, a lot of studying. I ask questions. I go out, travel these countries, I watch how people live, and I learn. And I always ask my mother, I said, Mother, how come is everything white? I said, why is Jesus white with blonde and blue eyes? Why is the Lord's Supper all white men? Angels are white, Pope and Mary and even the angels. I said, Mother, when we die, do we go to heaven? She said, naturally we go to heaven. I said, well, what happened to all the black angels they took the pictures? I said, oh, I know. If the white folks was in heaven too, then the black angels were in the kitchen preparing the milk and honey. I said, listen, you quit saying that, boy. I was always curious, and I always wondered why I had to die to go to heaven. Why I couldn't have pretty cars and good money and nice homes now? Why do I have to wait till I die to get milk and honey? And I said, Mama, I don't want no milk and honey. I like steaks and I said, milk and honey is a laxative anyway. Do we have a lot of bathrooms in heaven? So anyway, I was always curious. I always wondered why. You know, Tarzan is the king of the jungle in Africa. He was white. White man. I saw this white man swinging around Africa with a diaper and hollering. Oh! You all see Tarzan over here? Right. Tarzan? And all the Africans, so he's beating them up and breaking the lion's jaw. And here's Tarzan talking to the animals, and the Africans been there for centuries, and he can't talk to the animals. Only Tarzan can talk to the animals. I always wondered why Miss America was always white. All the beautiful brown women in America, beautiful suntans, beautiful shapes, all type complexions, but she always was white. And Miss World was always white. And Miss Universe was always white. And then they got some stuff called White House cigars, White Swan soap, King White soap, White Cloud tissue paper, White Rain hair rinse, White Tornado flow wax. Everything was white. And the angel food cake was the white cake, and the devil food cake was the chocolate cake. I said, Mama, why is everything white? I always wondered, you know, and the president lived in the White House. And Mary had a little lamb, his feet as white as snow and Snow White. And everything was white. Santa Claus was white. And everything bad was black. The little ugly duckling was a black duck. And the black cat was the bad luck. And if I threaten you, I'm going to blackmail you. I said, Mama, why don't they call it white mail? They lie too. I was always curious. And then this is when I knew something was wrong. Won the Olympic gold medal in Rome met me. Olympic champion, the Russian standing right here, and the Pole right here. Is Poland considered a communist country? Yeah. Yeah, I'm defeating America's so-called threats or enemies. And the flag is going, dun, 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 dun. I'm standing so proud. Dun, 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 dun. I done whooped the world for America. Dun, 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 dun. I took my gold medal, thought I'd invented something. I said, man, I know I'm going to get my people freedom there. I'm the champion of the whole world, Olympic champion. I know I can eat downtown now. And I went downtown that day, had my big old medal on and went to breakfast. At that time, black things weren't integrated. The black folks couldn't eat downtown. And I went downtown, I sat down, and I said, you know, a cup of coffee, hot dog. He said, the lady said, we don't serve Negroes. I'm so mad. I said, I don't eat them either. Just give me a couple of hot I said, I'm the Olympic gold medal. 3 days ago, I fought for this country in Rome. I won the gold medal, and I'm going to eat. The manager, I heard her tell the manager, and he said, well, I'm not the man. Now he's got to go out. Anyway, I didn't raise the they put me out. And I had to leave that restaurant in my hometown where I went to church and served in their Christianity and fought and daddy fought in the wars. Just won the gold medal and couldn't eat downtown.
Let me back this up. I'm not sure what happened with
then at home, I won the gold medal, and I'm going to eat. The manager, I heard her tell the manager, said, I'm the Olympic gold medal. And 3 days ago, I fought for this country in Rome. I won the gold medal, and I'm going to eat. The manager, I heard her tell the manager, and he said, well, I'm not the man. Now he's got to go out. Anyway, I didn't raise her. They put me out. And I had to leave that restaurant in my hometown where I went to church and served in their Christianity and fought, and daddy fought in all the wars, just wanted to go medal and couldn't eat downtown. I said, something's wrong. And from then on, I've been a Muslim.
Yes, I was going to ask him, what attracted you to the
truth, the teachings of Elijah Muhammad on how black people's been brainwashed, how they've been taught to love white and hate black, how we've been robbed of our names in slavery, we were robbed of our culture, we were robbed of our true history, so it left us a walking dead man. So you got black people in all white country, and they don't know nothing about themselves, they don't speak the language, they're just mentally dead. And this is happening all over the world. But the first place that will rise will be the black people of America, and then the rest of them will. But it's going to, I was one who heard the truth. And when I heard the truth about my name was not Cassius Clay, I know a black man in America named John Hawkins. Now, you know who John Hawkins was. He was a slave trader from England. But the white people at that time, if one had 5 slaves and his name was Jones, they would be called Jones property. If you was auctioned off to Mr. Smith, your name was Smith, identifying you as property of certain masters. So now that I'm free, now that I'm no longer a slave, then I want a name of my ancestors, Muhammad Ali. Like a Chinese, how could a Chinese look named Robert Smith? How would a German look named Edward Goldberg? A Jewish name. So when I heard that we don't have our names, we don't speak our true Arabic language, we were robbed of Islam, our true religion, and we've been made deaf, dumb, and blind in slavery, and Elijah Muhammad was taught by Allah, who we refer to as God, to teach us the truth that will free us. And when I heard it, I've been free ever since. I have no racial problems. I don't go where I'm not wanted. I'm proud, and Islam did it. So, and after these things that I heard in church, preaching, watching this and that, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint it. But as soon as I heard the truth that Elijah Muhammad teaches us in America, it made me accept it. Things are getting much better, but things are getting much better.
All right, so that's from 1971. That's the champ, the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali. That is hilarious. I always like seeing that. I've seen the full interview also. That was an interview that a gentleman, I forgot the guy's first name. His last name is Parkinson. He did with Muhammad Ali. All right, so right before the break, we were talking, right before that clip, I was talking about LeBron James. Read the article from New York Times dealing with LeBron James and other stars form voting rights group. Okay, so that's something really good, leveraging our economics to enforce our politics and teach our people. And let's go back to some more of these updates. And we have Linda, Shanine, Nikki on Facebook and on YouTube. We have Buccaneer, Fly Girl, W. Canty, just a few people. I've Heru watching us on Facebook. Okay, so this is we're in overtime. Is our 3rd hour. We do 2 hours on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. Here in Detroit, and then we continue on my social media platforms. This is being since they have us broadcasting. The radio station has us broadcasting from home because of Governor Gretchen Whitmer's stay-at-home order. Now, it's supposed to, we know barbershops, things like that, are open back up June 15th. So we'll see when the radio station has us back in the studios because we're practicing social distancing. So we'll see what happens. Let's continue with some of these updates from Washington Post. This is from June 10th, 2020, dealing with George Floyd, the live updates they had dealing with George Floyd. Tom Brady, Drew Brees joined hundreds of athletes calling for an end to qualified immunity for police. Now, this is interesting. So you have all these people coming out, expressing their support for different aspects of this whole conversation, this movement. More than 1,400 current and former professional athletes and coaches, including stars such as Tom Brady, who's a Donald Trump supporter, Drew Brees, Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich, Dak Prescott, and CeCe Sabathia, have signed a petition asking the U.S. Congress to pass a recently introduced bill that would end the legal doctrine known as qualified immunity, which often prevents U.S. citizens from collecting damages over wrongdoing by government officials, such as police officers, even if they violate the U.S. Constitution. Now, the Civil Rights Act of 1871 established the right of U.S. citizens to collect damages from government officials who violated their constitutional rights. But that act has been watered down by the U.S. Supreme Court decisions that introduced the doctrine of qualified immunity, which shields government officials from civil lawsuits, so long as they did not violate clearly established law. Critics say such a standard is nearly impossible to meet. So all this deals with law. In politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. All this deals with law. If we continue looking at some of these updates here, we see that one of the officers involved in the killing of George Floyd was released from jail on bond. Thomas Lane, former officer charged in George Floyd's killing, released from jail after posting bail. His bail was $750,000. Now, I don't get caught up. I've studied dozens of police shootings, right? I don't get caught up on the officer being released on bail, all that stuff part of the process. I don't get caught up on none of that. I'll focus on the arrest, them being fired from their job, charged, convicted. All that other stuff, they got bail, the union raised money to get them out. I don't get caught up on all that stuff. I stay focused. Okay. It's just like with Amber Geiger. People upset Amber Geiger got out on bail and then she moved from this apartment to that apartment. I said, look, I said from the beginning, Amber Geiger was going to prison. How did I know she was going to prison? Because I read the affidavit that she gave to the Dallas Police Department, and I read the affidavit that she gave to the Texas Rangers. And there was conflicting testimony there in those affidavits, and that's sworn testimony, penalty of perjury. So either you lied here or you lied there. So I said from the beginning, after I read those two, I said, oh, she's going to prison. So all that, let her get bail and all that, move from this apartment to that apartment, oh, her ass going to prison. And what happened? All right. Christopher Columbus statue toppled at Minnesota Capitol. Protesters pulled down the statue of Christopher Columbus outside the Minnesota State Capitol in St. Paul, Minnesota, this past Wednesday, as demonstrations sparked by the death of George Floyd in police custody continue to take aim at monuments viewed by many as symbols of racism. A group of protesters, some of them from a local Native American advocacy group, gathered in front of the towering bronze statue in the afternoon, according to Minneapolis Star Tribune reporter Jesse Van Berkel, Berkel. The group told a law enforcement officer on the scene what they plan to do. Quote, is there any other resolution, end quote, the officer asked to Van Berkel. Around 5 p.m., the protesters tossed a rope around the statue and ripped it from its pedestal, according to Fox Channel 9. Now, video showed the moment after the statue toppled. Protesters cheered and TV news crews rushed over to get footage. Quote, the time for being complacent is over, end quote, protester Mike Forcia told Fox Channel 9. Activists have pushed for years to remove the monument, which was given as a gift from Minnesota's Italian American community in 1931. It stood several miles from where George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. A recent petition called for it to be replaced with a statue of Prince Rogers Nelson, who's from Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is at least the third Columbus statue to be toppled or vandalized in a major U.S. city in recent days. On Tuesday, protesters pulled down a bronze Columbus bronze statue of Columbus in Richmond, Virginia's Byrd Park, BYRD, and submerged it face down in a lake. In Boston, someone removed the head from a Columbus statue in the city's North End and left pieces of it scattered in the area. All right. Hopefully people will study the history of Columbus as well. Read Dr. John Henrik Clarke's book, and I have it around here somewhere. Dr. John Henrik Clarke's book, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism. In these statues, now, once again, Christopher Columbus never came to this land that we call the United States of America, the contiguous United States. He never came to this landmass. The closest he comes here is Cuba, which is 90 miles away. Okay. So I speak all across the country. And when I say this to a lot of adults. Some of them look at me like I'm crazy. And like, no, you have to go look at where Columbus went on his 4 voyages. He went to Central America. He goes into South America. He goes into the Caribbean. He goes into places like Haiti, Puerto Rico, Honduras, Panama, the Bahamas, things like this. He never comes to this landmass that we call the United States of America. Okay. So, we have to study this history. Now, let me see. Do I have that? Where's that book? It's around here. I just saw it. That's the ISIS papers. And here is here it is right here. Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism by Dr. John Henrik Clarke. We all need to read this book. Okay. And then also the ISIS papers by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. The Keys to the Colors. The ISIS papers by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Just 2 extremely important books here. Also, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy is another important book as well. Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. Okay, let's continue here. So I want to look at some more updates here just a second. So NASCAR bans all displays of Confederate flags. Oh my God. What's going to happen to the John Cougar Mellencamp fans who go to NASCAR? I'm not saying all John Cougar Mellencamp fans fly the Confederate battle flag, but I know some of them do. NASCAR announced this past Wednesday that it was banning displays of the Confederate flag at all of its events and properties. NASCAR had already prohibited the use of the Confederate flag on its race cars and licensed merchandise, but had allowed it for fans to display them, although it had asked them to refrain from doing so in 2015, following the murders of 9 African-American churchgoers in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, Bubba Wallace, the only African-American NASCAR driver, wonder why, in NASCAR's Top Flight Cup Series, called this past Monday on NASCAR to, quote, get rid of all Confederate flags, end quote. He is set to drive a car featuring the phrase Black Lives Matter. And that actually happened. He drove a car on Wednesday with the phrase Black Lives Matter. So NASCAR is saying they're going to prohibit the Confederate flag and ask people to leave it at home, things like this. So so here you have NASCAR doing this, and this is putting them in opposition to Donald Trump. And you have the NFL coming out in support of players taking a knee, which puts the NFL in opposition with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is sinking in the polls. All this stuff is caving in on Trump at the same time. Now, at the same time, Donald Trump is planning to start his little rallies back up. He's going to have one June 19th, Juneteenth in Tulsa, Oklahoma, move that to June 20th. And these events that he has now, when you go study these events, right, you have to sign a waiver saying that if you catch coronavirus at the event, you're not going to sue the Trump campaign or any of the organizers, anything like that, right? Which means that Trump And the organizers know there's a risk that you'll get coronavirus because they're not practicing social distancing. They're not going to wear masks, anything like that. So these are like super spreader events. These are going to be super spreader events. Now, you already have 21 states that have an increase in coronavirus. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Okay. And, you know, how should I put this? Okay. Some of this is going to be karma. I mean, but, you know, okay, go ahead with your bad self. Don't wear a mask. Go ahead with your bad self. Now, notice we're at about what 2.2 million reported cases. We're at about 115,000 deaths. By September, we're going to be at 200,000 deaths. And we're seeing an increase in states that opened up too soon. We're seeing a spike in reported cases and a spike in deaths. At the same time, Trump has stopped his daily coronavirus task force briefings because he just wants to happy talk away coronavirus. He don't know what the hell to do. He just trying to happy talk away it and just ignore it. When we look at the Breonna Taylor case in Louisville, Kentucky, hometown of one of my heroes, Muhammad Ali, information about the police report came out this past week. Louisville police released nearly blank incident report for killing of Breonna Taylor, newspaper reports. The Louisville Metro Police Department's incident report for the killing of Breonna Taylor is nearly blank and includes incorrect information, the Louisville Courier-Journal reported. 3 months after officers shot and killed Breonna Taylor in her apartment while she was asleep, while they were serving a no-knock search warrant as part of a narcotics investigation, and they're looking for somebody who was already in custody, police have released a report about the March 13th, 2020 incident, but the 4-page report contains no narrative detail about what happened. It says Breonna Taylor had no injuries and there was not a forced entry, where she was shot 8 times. So okay. And there was forced entry. They had a no-knock warrant and the occupants didn't let them in. So how the hell they get in? The Washington Post has previously reported that according to a lawsuit filed by the family, Breonna Taylor was shot 8 times and officers rammed in the door to conduct the no-knock warrant. Richard A. Green of the Courier-Journal, who's the editor of the Louisville Courier-Journal, told a reporter from his newspaper, quote, "I read this report and have to ask the mayor, the police chief, and the city's lawyers, are you kidding? This is what you consider being transparent to taxpayers and the public," end quote. So this is an example when you have a lot of people, activists, and even politicians talk about reimagining police departments and reallocating resources, reducing responsibilities, firing some police officers. In some cases, some police departments are so corrupt that they just have to be dismantled and restructured, rebuilt from ground level. Now, they're still going to have some type of law enforcement. If you look in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when you watch interviews with members of the city council, when you listen to them long enough, they're not saying they're not going to have law enforcement. As they said it's going to take about a year to really restructure all of this. 2, in the interim, after they dismantle the police department, they may use local sheriffs for the interim or something like that. But when you listen to them, they're not saying we're not going to have any type of law enforcement. They're saying this particular Minneapolis Police Department, we're going to dismantle this thing right here. This thing is beyond saving. So there are approximately 18,500 police departments. As I've said before, last week's show, the June 7th show, as I said at the beginning of this show, you can't take a cookie cutter approach to all police departments, but you have to look at reducing responsibilities, shrinking responsibilities, and reallocating resources. Some departments do a much better job than others. Some are just horrible. Okay, approximately 800,000 police officers. I don't want to put all police departments into the same bag because that's not accurate. Okay, some just have to be dismantled and start all over. Others is not like that. Others is not as bad. So you have to look at a case-by-case basis. Okay, you have to look at a case-by-case basis. So the newspaper is suing the police department. The Courier Journal, Louisville Courier Journal is suing the police department for the investigative file for the shooting. Detective Joshua James, Jaynes, who applied for the no-knock search warrant served at Breonna Taylor's apartment, has been placed on administrative reassignment. Interim Louisville Police Chief Robert Schroeder, Schroeder, announced at a news briefing this past Wednesday. Okay, so check out the rest of this. Is that Washington Post and other news outlets covered this story as well. Louisville police released near blank incident report for killing of Breonna Taylor, newspaper report. So a lot of people were hearing about the police report and they were just baffled. There's really, this is what you want to release? You saying there was no injury? She was shot 8 times. She died. That okay? This what you want to go with? All right. Okay, some more BS from Donald Trump. The White House defends Trump's tweet endorsing conspiracy theory about Buffalo protesters. So the 75-year-old white male protested there in Buffalo, New York. Everybody saw the video of him being pushed by the police. He falls back, hits his head on the pavement. Now, he suffered a brain injury. The information just came out past couple of days. He suffered a brain injury from that. Dumbass Donald Trump on Wednesday, he tweeted about this. In the White House on Wednesday, they defended dumbass Donald Trump's recent tweet endorsing the baseless conspiracy theory that the 75-year-old protester in Buffalo seen on the video being pushed to the ground by police could have been part of a quote unquote setup coordinated by anti-fascist demonstrators. Now, see, this is one of the reasons why Donald Trump needs to be voted out of office, because he retweets all these white supremacist conspiracy theories because he's sick. This is a sick ass man. Okay. And Twitter should have banned him from Twitter a long time ago, because if it had been anybody else, a lot of the stuff that he puts out and attacking federal judges, things like this, they would have shut down their Twitter accounts a long time ago. Donald Trump tweeted, "I watched, he fell harder than was pushed." Trump said Tuesday in his tweet. Trump said that the gentleman was aiming a scanner at the police. Could have been a setup, like a cell phone. Donald Trump said it's a scanner. Where'd you get that it's a scanner? White House press secretary, dumb blonde Kayleigh McEnany, said at Wednesday's news briefing that Trump doesn't regret the tweet. She said the president was asking questions about an interaction in a video clip he saw, and the president has the right to ask those questions. Why the hell would he go on Twitter to ask those questions? Why wouldn't he ask the Department of Justice to investigate? Why wouldn't he call the mayor? Why wouldn't he call the police chief? Why would he go on Twitter to ask those questions and circulate a conspiracy theory? Pressed further on the issue, Kayleigh McEnany said that Trump was, quote, in no way condoning violence. No, this is a guy that said, if you get arrested, I'll pay for medical bills if you knock one of these people out. This is a guy that said, years ago, something to the effect, protesters like that, we would have knocked them out or something. I forgot exactly how he put it. This is the same guy who said this is the same guy who unleashed armed police in riot gear on peaceful protesters in Washington, D.C. to move them out of the way so he can go across the street and pose in front of a church, not go inside the church and pray, but pose in front of a church with a boarded up, with an upside down Bible. This is the same guy that inflicted violence on peaceful protesters. And White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany is saying that Donald Trump in no way condones violence. Okay, whatever. Enough of that dumbass. Donald Trump rejects calls to rename military bases named after Confederate generals. Because once again, he's trying to